Hi, I'm Eric from Stinger Electronics. Today we're going to show you how to install the brand new Heigh10 10-inch multimedia system in your Ford F-150. Whether you're the casual driver looking to add Android Auto or CarPlay, or an audiophile looking for the best quality sound system for your truck, Heigh10 is packed with tons of great features and a sleek, beautiful design. Today we'll be working in this 2012 Ford F-150. Once we install our infotainment multimedia system, it's going to transform this vehicle. It's going to add Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, it's going to have video from the backup camera, and enough power to drive all the speakers in the vehicle. It also has all the connections needed if you want to add aftermarket amplifiers and expand the audio system. Before we start, let's take a look at what we're going to need. The Stinger F-150 radio replacement kit includes Heigh10 infotainment system, F-150 dash kit, wiring harnesses, and dual USB port. We recommend having these tools handy to complete the install. Plastic pry tools, Phillips screwdriver, a ratchet with extension and sockets, crimpers, pliers, tin snips, flush cuts, dash snake, a pick tool, a Torx wrench, crimp caps, and zip ties. First, to gain access to the radio, we have to remove a few trim panels. We're going to start by removing the two 7mm bolts that are here above the gauge cluster. Now with the trim panel loose, we can carefully slide it toward us, push down a little bit at the back, and remove it from the vehicle. This is going to give you access to remove this next panel. We're going to use our pry tool and start at the bottom and work our way to the top. Taking your pry tool, starting at the bottom of this trim panel, pop it out toward you. Working your way to the top of the trim panel, there's clips all the way up. There's also some harnesses here you need to disconnect. That's actually it from this side of the vehicle. I'm going to jump to the other side of the vehicle to take apart the panels on that side of the truck. In order to remove this panel from the dash, we first have to get to a bolt that's right behind the airbag. So we're going to open the glove box, squeeze the two tabs in the back to lower it completely. This is going to give us access to the three 8mm bolts that are located here, holding the airbag assembly in place. With the three 8mm bolts removed from the airbag assembly, we're now ready to carefully remove that assembly from the dash. Reaching up inside the glove box, using your panel pry tool, carefully setting aside will give you access to that bolt. With that bolt removed, now we can remove the passenger side air vent. Take your pry tool, pulling toward yourself and away from the dash, and be sure to disconnect the harness. Now, just so we feel a little more comfortable during this next portion of the installation, I'm going to go ahead and set the airbag back where it should be. Just kind of place it in the dash for now. Now we're ready to remove the bolts that hold the radio in place, but first we need to remove this little rubber tray. Take your panel pry tool, get to about to the corner of this little rubber mat and give it a little lift. Then you can just lift up the front and pull that out. Now we can remove the 7mm bolts from the top of the radio and the bottom. With all the bolts removed from the center console, we can now remove the radio, climate control, and pocket by pulling straight out from the center of the dash. There's a lot of harnesses that are connected, so you may want to have your pry tool handy. These are the harnesses you're going to need to disconnect. All right, now all we have to do is remove these four 7mm bolts, and we can pull the factory CD player out of the dash and disconnect the harnesses that connect it to the vehicle. Now that we have the factory radio out of the dash, we're ready to head to the bench, wire up the wiring harness, build the bracket, and get everything ready to install the new radio into the truck. Now we're ready to start making our wiring connections. We've simplified this piece as much as possible by providing plug-and-play harnesses for the vehicle, and most of the wires on this harness match the wires on the Stinger harness. There's a few that don't match, and we'll cover those in detail when we get to them. We're making our connections using crimp caps. If you feel more comfortable soldering the connections and covering those with either heat shrink or tape, you can do that. Either way, we're going to use some zip ties to clean up our wires so it's neat inside the dash. Let's start making those connections. We're all set with the wires that match color for color. Now we're going to cover the 4 that don't match exactly. From the radio harness, you're going to take the orange with white stripe. That's going to connect to the orange on the Stinger harness. Next, we're going to take the green wire from the radio harness and connect that to the pink wire from the Stinger harness. Now take the purple with white stripe wire from the radio harness and connect it to the green with white stripe wire from the Stinger harness. The last wire is the pink wire, which is our speed wire. So there's another harness here which has a blue wire labeled speed. Removing the insulation from that and connect the pink wire to the blue wire. Now that we've made all the wiring connections, we're just going to use a few zip ties to kind of tidy up the wiring a bit. With all of our wiring connections made, now it's time to go ahead and set up and connect to our radio replacement module. There's a dial on the side that needs to be set to position 4 before connecting to the vehicle. You can use a small screwdriver. Here I'm using the edge of my knife. Set to position 4. There's tape that goes over the end of the connector. We need to cut that and peel that back. Now the harness can be plugged into the module. If your truck is equipped with steering wheel controls, be sure to take the 4-pin connector and plug that into the other side of the module. This is what's going to connect into the back of the Stinger multimedia radio and keep the functions of your steering wheel controls. We've moved the wiring aside just for a minute so that we can focus on assembling the brain and mounting everything to the brackets of the kit to get ready to put into the truck. We'll start by taking this plastic bracket and this metal bracket and aligning this with the grooves. Leaves a nice little space for the brain of the unit to slide inside here. Once it lines up with the front of the plate, there's 2 screw holes that line up right there. We're just going to place screws in those and tighten those as well. Those 2 screws in place, that's the bracket for the brain. Now we can modify the brackets for the kit. There's a little bit of printing here that says L for left and R for right. That's going to go on the left and right sides of the vehicle. Those are going to snap into the kit. But before we can mount this in the truck, we have to remove the tabs that aren't needed. If you have a tool like flush cuts, these are great for removing these. Just get right in there, snip off the ones that aren't needed. In this, we're going to save only these top 2 tall brackets. Everything else needs to be removed. It's not a bad idea to wear safety glasses in doing this step because plastic might go flying. And then on the inside of the bracket, we have to remove this. This is a preparation for a single DIN mounting, but we are mounting as a double DIN configuration, so we do not need that. And then these little tabs are going to line up at the front of the bracket. You kind of set those in there and give it a little bit of a wiggle to kind of get those to fit into place. Sometimes there's a little bit of extra plastic on the front you have to kind of snap out of the way to get these to actually snap all the way in, like so. We'll do the same preparations on the other side of the other bracket, removing all the tabs except for the tall 2 tabs. That's going to go on this side of the kit. Kind of going in an angle and then worked in like so. Now we can take the brain and work on lining that up inside the kit. So we're going to take the brain of the unit and slide it in and use this second tab we've cut off here to align with that front screw. It's a good idea just to kind of set these screws in and tighten them a little of the way, but not all the way at first, until you get all 4 screws in. Then you can ensure that it's set in the kit correctly, and then go ahead and tighten them up for good. Again, lining this front screw up with that tab we cut off right about there works pretty well for us in this particular truck. Now that we've got the 4 screws in and they're kind of tight but not really tight, we can check for alignment, make sure everything looks flush, looks pretty good. I think we're good to tighten things up. If you do find that the screen is too close to the dash in your F-150, adjusting these screws and sliding one way or the other will move the screen front or back. The dual USB kit that we include with this radio interface has a dash mount bracket that you won't need for this installation, so go ahead and set that aside. It also includes a dust cover, splash guard, that can be used, which we're not going to use in this installation. You would route your USB cables through here so that the cover could close like this. This is the dash kit that we include. We're going to mount the USBs right here. So we'll start by passing those through the dash. This is a personal preference whether the USBs are vertical or horizontal at this point. Take the washer that has the flat ring on it and feed that over the USBs first. You'll want to feed that over the cables first so that the flat side is against the kit. And the second lock washer can go on to secure that washer in place. Thread the first washer into place. Once you get it reasonably tight, check the fit and the location and alignment. And then thread on that second washer to lock that first one in place. Now with the USBs mounted, we can take the climate control components from the factory dash and mount those in here. The first step to getting the climate controls out of the factory radio is separating this lower pocket from the radio. We're going to need to remove this USB and aux port, which we can either do from the back by squeezing the tabs and pushing, or if you look right here at the bottom of the badge where it says powered by, there's a small hole you can put your pry tool and carefully lift that right out of the dash. That gives you access to that 7mm. Now we need to take the traction control, hazard button, and passenger airbag switch out. There's 2 little clips. If you squeeze on the sides, push it towards the front of the dash, slide right out. Then on the back, the climate control section has this white bracket. There's 4 T20 Torx bolts that we need to remove here. That's just about everything we need from this factory setup. Now we can take the climate controls and the lower pocket and these other buttons and reinstall them into our kit. Set the factory climate controls into the bottom of our kit, and taking the factory T20 screws, Screw those 4 back in and secure the climate controls into our kit. Now we're ready to take the factory hazard switch assembly and snap that into our dash kit. There's a nice little snap when it's in place. Now we're ready to attach the mounting bracket to the back of our Heigh10 screen. You'll notice the bracket does say top. We're going to be mounting it with the top side down. When you do this, we recommend you cut the back strap and make a smaller back strap to apply to the bracket. That's just going to help secure the piece in place. I'm going to pitch this back and install it on the angled position. We're going to install one set screw on the one side of the bracket. I'm not going to install the second set screw yet. We're going to make that little bracket here in a minute and I'll show you how to apply that. Taking our bracket, lining it up on the back of the Heigh10 screen, we can now install the 4 set screws that lock it into position. Now that the bracket's attached to the screen, we're going to go ahead and make our little backstrap piece. Using the backstrap that's included with your Stinger unit, we're going to make a smaller backstrap. Find the end with the elongated hole, go to the second hole past that, trim the piece off. Now we're going to trim close to these holes, basically trimming off the corners. That makes a nice backstrap that we can attach to the bracket, which is going to help secure it into position. This step you would normally complete inside the vehicle at the final step of assembly. It's a little difficult to see in the dash at that point, so we're completing this step here on the bench so you can see what we're doing. Grab the Heigh10 screen. This piece will be mounted inside the vehicle. We're going to apply the spring clip to the top bar and pull down until the bottom bar latches. Now we're going to install our backstrap here. Now when we install our set screw, it's going to lock that backstrap into place, securing the display. This small backstrap secures the upside down bracket into place. Now that we're back in the truck, we're going to go ahead and remove this trim panel up here so that we've got a spot that we can mount the GPS antenna up inside the dash. Pop off that little mat. That's going to give you access to the 2 7mm bolts inside the dash. With those 2 screws out, lift up on the back of the panel, and then you can remove that. This antenna does have a magnet built in, and there's a nice little metal chassis right behind this display. It'll sit right on top of that. Then we route the cable down through the dash to where the radio is going to sit. Kind of tidied up the excess wire there. We're just going to go ahead and tuck that inside the dash. We have the antenna sitting vertical, pointed up toward the sky, and the other end of the antenna is down here where the radio is going to sit inside the dash. With that all in place, we can return this panel and reinstall those 2 7mm bolts. With the GPS antenna installed in the dash of the truck, we're ready to go ahead and make the wiring connections to the brain of the Stinger radio so that we can connect it into the vehicle. This harness with all the RCA connectors on it here, these are your audio outputs if you want to add external amplifiers and expand the audio system. This yellow video input that says Cam 1 in, this is your reverse camera input. If the truck was equipped with a reverse camera, or if you're installing one, connect that video input right here. This particular truck doesn't have a reverse camera, but we're going to connect this harness anyway. Another harness to connect has 2 labels. One says SWI, that's your steering wheel interface. That's an important one to plug into the back of the brain if the vehicle has steering wheel controls. The main power and audio connection harness here. This is our multi-camera input harness. So if you're adding extra cameras to the vehicle, 2, 3, and 4 cameras, you can add those inputs right into here. These are the triggers that will trigger those cameras to show on the radio. The antenna adapter. Connect the 2 LVDS cables. From the radio replacement module, the 3.5mm connector needs to be plugged in to the harness that we have over here, labeled SWI for steering wheel interface. That's going to ensure that your factory steering wheel controls control the new radio. Before we can put the radio into the dash, the last connection we need to make is the dual USB connections. Since this piece is going to go in after the radio is in place, we need to go ahead and make these connections now because they'll be difficult to reach once the radio is in the dash. Now we can connect to the vehicle's harness using the plug-and-play connectors and the antenna adapters. Now we can take our plug-and-play harnesses and connect to the vehicle wiring. This can all be tucked inside the dash. You're going to want to tuck all the cables from the radio inside the dash, except for these two, the display cables. We're going to need to route those down underneath here, through this hole, so that they can connect to the display. And then we can slide the radio into the dash. So then we can grab our wrench, put those 4 7mm bolts back in place. Now we're ready to go ahead and test fit the screen and turn the vehicle on to make sure that everything works before we put all the dash kit back on. Connect the 2 USB cables for the LVDS and power. And then you're going to take the top spring and then clip the radio down in. Now let's turn on the truck, make sure it works. Awesome, everything looks great here. So now we can turn off the truck, remove the screen, reinstall the vehicle panels, and complete our installation. We're just about ready to put our new dash kit on, but before we do that, we're going to clean up a little bit of the wiring. There's 3 harnesses we're not going to use. This is a connector from the factory radio we don't need anymore. Push that back inside the dash. And then underneath our climate controls, there's the factory cigarette lighter and the aux connector. We're going to tuck those inside the dash. Now we can take our USB cables, tuck those in the dash as well, and we can connect all of the connectors from the vehicle to our new kit, making sure to take the 2 video cables and pass those through for the monitor. This is the factory USB that's going to connect into the factory USB port just so there's not an empty space. Slide this way and make sure that we connect the hazard button at the top. And just align these. That's how our kit fits into the dash. Now we can install the mounting screws, snap the dash panels back on, and complete the installation. All right, now we're going to go ahead and install the 3 screws to secure the main bracket into place. 1 down here in the sync panel, and 2 up top above the radio. Now we're ready to reinstall the passenger side air vent panel. In order to get clearance in the dash, we need to slide the airbag over just enough so that this piece can line up in here. Make sure to reconnect the connector for the 12-volt power outlet. Snaps in. Now we can reinstall that bolt. This is the gold one with the coarse thread. Now with that panel back in place, we can reposition the airbag and then reinstall the bolts through the glove box. It snaps right into place, then we'll lower the glove box and we'll reinstall those 3 8mm bolts. Now with the airbag tightly secured, we're going to go ahead and close the glove box. That's it for this side of the vehicle. We're going to head on over to that side and reinstall the rest of the panels. Now we're ready to reinstall the driver's side air vent panel. There's one clip that plugs in case you have a 4-wheel drive, 2-wheel drive switch here. And then carefully slide this behind the shifter and snap it into place. I like to start at the top and work my way down to the bottom. Now we're going to reinstall the instrument cluster trim To make that easier and gain a little extra clearance, we're going to lower the steering wheel and actually move the shifter down as well. Now we can take this large panel, carefully slide it into place. Clips on the top, clips on the bottom, and then 2 7mm bolts will be reinstalled into the top. Just about done. Now to snap the factory aux panel back in, and we can mount the radio screen onto the dash. So we're going to take the factory sync panel, pass the USB, and clip it into place. And then snap that right back into the location here. Now we'll reinstall the little rubber mat above the radio. Slide the back in first, and then just push the front down into that little groove. Now we're ready to take our beautiful 10-inch screen and attach it to the brain to complete the installation. We're going to go ahead and use the optional accordion boot. There's a little plastic tab here at the top that indicates the top of the boot. Feed these 2 wires through. Connect those to the display. And the top of the boot's going to clip in. Give it a little stretch there. Make sure it clips into the 2 clips at the top and the 2 clips at the bottom. Carefully tuck the wires in, and in this installation, we're going to engage the spring onto the top bar and then lower the bottom in. Now we're ready to turn the truck on and check it out. That completes the installation of our brand new Stinger Heigh10 10-inch multimedia infotainment system in this Ford F-150. For more videos, subscribe to our Stinger Electronics YouTube channel, and for more information about Stinger Electronics, visit our website, stingerelectronics.com.